go ahead and get started. If that works for everyone. I will share, maybe share some slides here. Okay. All right, everybody see this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to the Plant Postdocs 4th webinar on preparing postdocs for the permanent job market. This is our 2nd seminar on industry and government jobs. I'm Allison Barnes and I'll be moderating today's seminar. I'm an NSF GRFP postdoc working with Ruben Rayon Alvarez at North Carolina State University. And I'm also the new vice chair of Plant Postdocs. So before we get started, I just want to explain briefly the structure of today's webinar. So it's going to be about 60 minutes. And for the participants today, you'll be in the listener seat for the first 20 minutes or so. And each of our panelists will explain their personal experiences navigating the job market. The second half is then designed for you to interact with our speakers. And so it will be open for any questions, comments, and inquiries regarding the job market. They'll be happy to take your questions and share their experiences. We would like for you to submit your questions through the Q&A box. So once you've submitted a question there, after all of our panelists have spoken, I will then try to summarize questions and group them into common themes. If you ask the question and you want to clarify or interact with the speaker, please use the raise hand option and one of us will unmute you. So due to the number of participants today, we just really need to follow this question and answer policy. So that's how we will do that. And before I introduce today's speakers, Sandra Hoffberg will introduce the Plant Postdocs.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sandra Hoffberg, and I'm a postdoc at Columbia University studying phylogenetics in the genus Amaranthus and the spread of herbicide resistance in weedy Amaranthus species across the United States. I'm the Secretary of Plant Postdocs, and I want to take a few minutes to introduce our group and the activities we are doing. Plant Postdocs started with the conversation between Arif Ashraf and Sunil Kenchamane Raju about how every postdoc position is transient and we are constantly on the lookout for a more permanent job. They created a plant postdoc community so we can discuss, explore, and support each other as we prepare for our future career path in academia or industry. Plant Postdocs is over 1 year old, and we have just transitioned into new leadership. I will briefly mention some of our key activities through Plant Postdocs. We have a Slack group to chat about job opportunities, the application process, interviews, etc. And currently we have more than 215 active Slack members. We have an official website and Twitter account as a source of information on job ads and so on. Recently, we have crossed 2,400 followers on our official Twitter account. We have started an editable Google spreadsheet job board with current jobs and their status, leveraging information from our members throughout the world and through social media. We have initiated potential plant peer reviewer database, 3PRD, recently, and 150 members signed up. This 3PRD database will help early career researchers to gain experience as reviewers. And if you haven't signed up for this and would like to, please do so after this webinar because we are closing signups tomorrow. This is our 4th webinar featuring early career plant scientists. We organize 2 webinars for academic jobs and 2 webinars for government or industry jobs each year. And all of our webinars are recorded and available on our YouTube channel. We are making Plant Postdocs more structured. We now have an advisory board composed of 4 faculty members and Plant Postdocs co-founder Sunil. And we are planning other activities and resources. And if you have suggestions for what you'd like to see or initiatives you'd like to lead, please get in touch with Arif, Allison, or myself. And for information on how to join this group, please visit plantpostdocs.com. I want to thank you all for joining us today. And now Allison will introduce our panelists.
Thanks, Sandra. Okay, so we have 4 great speakers today. I'm really excited to introduce all of them to you. So first we have Carola Dowd, who's a site operations lead at CTC Genomics in St. Louis, Missouri. We also have Rishi Masalia, who's the Director of Data Science and Communications Manager at LeafWorks, Inc., based in California, I think. Sorry, Rishi, I don't remember what city. So we also have Sarah Turner-Hissong, who's a genomics discovery and application scientist with Bayer in Chesterfield, Missouri, and Jacob Washburn, who's a research geneticist with the USDA-ARS in Columbia, Missouri. So with that, I think we'll start with Carola, and I'll give each of you a little wave over here when you get to your about 5-minute mark, if you can keep your introductions to about 6 minutes or so.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carola Dowd. I'm a PhD MBA. I got my PhD from University of Missouri in plant science, plant insect and microbial sciences back in 2017. And when I was about to graduate, I was exploring different career paths and decided that academia was not going to be for me. So I decided to go into more of an industry role, and actually a combination with industry and entrepreneurship. And I decided to jump in and start an MBA. So I did a full-time MBA from Washington University here in St. Louis, specializing in operations and entrepreneurship. And right after that, I was looking for opportunities to understand how to run a business. I had many years of training in academia and science, but I was very interested in taking new technologies into the market. But at that point, I mean, before getting into the MBA, I had no clue about how you run a business. And so I got the MBA, got all the paper or the book worm training, and decided to find a job that actually give me the hands-on practice. And that's what throughout my network, actually, I was able to find CTC, which is a sugarcane company. They are based in Brazil, but they have a subsidiary here in St. Louis. And they were just opening the site, and the team was very small. And even though it's a big company in Brazil, it felt a lot like a startup here in St. Louis. So I thought, oh my God, what a great opportunity. I'm going to be able to see all different functions within a company. So that's when I decided to take this role. And now I'm the operation manager. I've been working for them for about a year and 2 months. And it's been quite exciting. And thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. And I'm so happy to hear everybody's stories and hear and answer any questions you have the best I can.
Awesome. Thanks, Carola. Okay, Rishi, you are up next.
Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Rishi Masalia. I am a PhD from the University of Georgia. And so I work at LeafWorks, Inc. We are a small botanical startup in Northern California. So I guess my path here is kind of similar to Carola's in the sense that I didn't really want to do academia. I knew that pretty early on. And in graduate school, I kind of was going down a completely different path. I was really interested in science communication. I started a couple of organizations at the University of Georgia to do science communication and train people, and that was kind of my path. But I'd always been interested in industry. I had thought maybe I would go work for a bigger company, something like Monsanto or at that point in time like DuPont. But decided to do SciComm, and when I was graduating in 2018 with my PhD, I had a couple of different options. One of them was a postdoc, just extending in my lab at University of Georgia, kind of to defer and figure out more options. But at that same time, I was networking with people, and some friends from graduate school were starting a company or had already started a company and were looking for their first employees. And they asked if I would like to join as their, at that point in time, bioinformatician, now data scientist. And I said, yeah, sure. That sounds like a great opportunity. moved out to California. We didn't really know a ton about business, similar to Carola. We wanted hands-on experience, so it was a crash course in everything business related, trying to bring products to market, trying to understand commercialization, hiring processes, everything. And so if you guys have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them from our experience. And I've been working here for 2 years. It's been a blast. Love every minute of it. I guess before I stop, one of the things that I would like to say is one of the things that really got me to where I am is the ability to be kind of like this generalist and know a lot about a lot of different things. And so especially in a startup world where you wear a million hats every day, you have to be able to talk about different facets. You have to be able to communicate what you're doing to other people, not only investors or customers or collaborators, but also each other, right? I'm the only person who does computer science in our company. And so if I need some amount of money for a resource or anything like that, I have to be able to convey that to the rest of the team. So being able to talk about your science effectively, even to your friends, I think is a very useful skill.
Awesome. Thank you. You guys are all like super on time. I don't have to give you any warnings at all. Okay, so next we'll move to Sarah.
I did end up making slides. Is it all right if I share?
Yeah, definitely.
You gave such nice prompts, and I thought, oh, I'll just stick with that. Let me go to presenter view and desktop one. Is that working okay?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, so I put my email up here. Definitely feel free to shoot me a message or contact me on Twitter if you want to talk more. I'm always happy to chat. I was actually on an academic route for a very long time until the middle of my postdoc. So I did a very traditional kind of master's, PhD. For my postdoc, I did sort of have a strategy in mind that I knew I wanted to gain some more bioinformatics, genomics, and population genetics experience. So I went into my postdoc with that in mind and applied for fellowships towards that goal. And then I'd say about 2 years into my postdoc, I think I was just really realizing that the academic path was not such a good fit for me. I was wanting more stability. I don't really like writing or publishing, so that doesn't tend to make a great academic career path. So I think I just like one day started looking at options in industry and said, I think I'm just going to apply and see what happens and see if this could be a route for me. So about 1 year before my postdoc funding was up, I did start applying to positions. I got really lucky and this discovery scientist role was posted. It's honestly the ideal position for me. I'm basically a postdoc, but I have that stability and I have access to a lot more resources. So I feel like I can really have an impact on crop improvement, which is my area of study. And I'd say too, during this process, I did try to emphasize professional development opportunities as I was moving along. So I think it's easy to get focused on technical skills, but lose some of the soft skills in the process. And then, oh, there it goes. I just wanted to share some resources that I found helpful when I was applying. So the Rasabar Lab posts this GitHub of successful applications. This is both for industry, academia, fellowships at the graduate and postdoc level. And this is just a really awesome resource if you're starting the application process. And then I heavily relied on feedback from friends, colleagues, and mentors on everything from my resume to practicing job talks and asking friends to like quickly read over important emails to make sure they were clear and the tone was all right. So definitely leverage that network. I also enrolled in a professional development course while I was at the University of Missouri for part of my postdoc, and this was extremely useful for like developing some of those soft skills. We did mock interviews, and you also get these like formal assessments of where your sort of strengths are. And then also, of course, like relying on an awesome network of colleagues you make as you go through your degrees and postdocs and et cetera. And last, I just want to throw these up. Industry often asks behavioral interview questions. So really good advice is to prep 3 to 10 behavioral interview scenarios using like the STAR method. You can Google these things. There's a lot of advice out there. So just a heads up that that's a thing that's kind of difficult to answer on the spot if you haven't thought about it beforehand. Let people know you're applying, they can advocate for you. I tailored my resume and cover letter for each position. That's basically all I submitted for my application, so it's really easy. And then also ask your interview panelists questions. I think that reflects really well. And I think something that helped me was emphasizing teamwork. So emphasize your own contributions, but also how you can work on a team and collaborate, especially across different disciplines. And then hopefully I'm not going over time. Remember that things are flexible. I think something that was really hard for me was like breaking a career path that I thought I was on for like a decade. I thought I was going to be a professor, and then I realized it wasn't right for me. So I kind of think about it like a fitness landscape. There are a lot of different optima. There are a lot of ways to get to those optima, and that landscape looks different for everyone. So don't feel like you're stuck on a particular path.
Awesome. Oh, am I? Okay, yep, I'm unmuted. Thanks, Sarah. So last but certainly not least, we will have Jacob give his talk.
Okay, so I'm Jacob Washburn, as was said. So I'll try to tell a little bit of my experience, I guess. I'm the only government one here, so I'll try to kind of highlight that part of how that evolved for me. I guess the first thing I'd say is that, you know, I started my preparation pretty early. You know, when I actually was married and had a 1-year-old child when I started my PhD, so I was pretty serious about finding a job, but kind of like Sarah, I sort of thought I was probably on the academic track. But I had, I always tried to be opportunistic, right? So whatever opportunities came up to take some kind of a course in, you know, some kind of soft skills or, you know, communication, I always tried to take those opportunities. And I had early on, I had one of my committee members was a USDA-ARS scientist. And so I kind of noticed from him that some of the differences in terms of having a little bit more money that was, you know, base funding and much less stress about applying for grants and publishing all the time and some of those kinds of things. And so those were things that were attractive to me. You know, I work in plants, and work on plants takes a long time. And so I guess this is a plant. Is this a plant specific group? Yes. Okay. So I guess we all work on plants, but you know, it takes a long time. And so I realized that in the USDA, there's a much longer vision of, you know, the idea is that it's okay for a project to take a decade, right? If you're doing a plant breeding project, it's okay to plan for 10 or 15 years in the future. Whereas in academic positions and even in industry positions, you really can't plan, you really can't do a 15, 20-year project, right? And so those were things that really attracted me to the government opportunities, I guess. Other things that I did, I always attended, whenever there were job talks, I always attended those. The talks, the lunches, the whole thing. And most of that was academic. I did have a chance to attend a USDA, set of USDA job talks. And that actually was when I decided that I wanted to apply. As a graduate student, I attended a series of those talks. And I decided I wanted to apply for USDA at that point. And that's actually what determined where I decided I wanted to do my postdoc. And I decided to do my postdoc in a successful USDA lab. And so I spent 2 years looking for funding. So I was like halfway through my PhD at this point, and I spent about 2 years looking for funding, trying to convince this person to hire me if I didn't get funding, and was able to to make that happen. So I would say that my journey was, there were a lot of surprises and things that changed and didn't work out the way that I thought. But I did start preparing really early. And that's one thing that I would encourage is, start as early as you can, looking for the opportunities. And you can change your mind somewhere along the way. I probably in the last year before I got my job, I seriously considered industry positions, but none came up that really fit with what I wanted. If one had, I probably would have taken it at that point. And I think I probably would have been just as happy with it as I am with my current position. There are a couple things that I wanted to mention based on the prompts that you gave. Applying for government jobs, if it's a federal job in the US, almost all of them are on USDA or USAjobs.gov is like the federal job listing. And like everything in the federal government, it's confusing and it's painful to get through. And so it took me several applications before I actually figured out how the system worked properly. And so, I can't emphasize enough, like start applying, prepare your application package as early as you can, because, actually whether it's government, industry, or academic, it's kind of complicated to put your whole life into a couple of pages. And, so if you have things recorded, like a master CV list that you record throughout, that kind of thing is really helpful. So I'm going to be the only one who goes over time, who goes long. I'm always long-winded. So, put that stuff together. I think, it takes weeks or months to put together your application the first time. After that, it's easier. Every job interview that I did, I would say I spent at least a week preparing for the interview, doing mock interviews, having friends look over stuff. So, it's a lot of time. You have to take it seriously, and just recognize, how much time it is. One thing before I get cut off, I wanted to say, I think when you look across the spectrum, I think of it as academic jobs on one side and industry jobs on the other, and government is kind of in between those two, right? And so with government jobs, you have a little bit more freedom to set your research directions than you would in a lot of industry positions. And you have a little more freedom. You have less funds, but you also don't have the kind of freedom that you have in academics, right? I mean, I have a boss who is my boss, and I have to keep them happy. It's not like your department chair who, once you're tenured, you can just do whatever you want. And I do have people who review what I'm doing, and they care very much about what I accomplish, right? Every year I have a review. And so I think it's somewhere between academics and industry. There's a little more flexibility than in industry, perhaps. There's less funds, but there also is some money that you're given to do things that you want, that you don't have to just apply for, right? So that's how I think about it. Yeah, there's a lot more I could say, but we'll get questions. So.
Awesome, thank you. So if you have questions, please start to post them in the Q&A. Are you guys hearing that feedback? Is it something on me? Okay. Maybe we're fixed now? All right. Okay, so if you have a question, please post it in the Q&A. I have a few. Oh, here we go. We have one already. So the question is that you all seem to be somehow related to doing data science. So can you shed some information about like what sort of wet lab research are you working on to generate that data? and it's for everyone.
I guess I can start. So I'm going to preface this with I'm not a wet lab person, as the question has pointed out. We do wet lab. We need to generate our own data, and as a startup, we have to pick and choose what data we want to generate. Like that matters a lot to us because money is kind of tight, so you always pick and choose what you want to do. For us, the types of things that we do, we focus on genomic questions. And so a lot of it is basic genomic preps. We're starting to dip in a little bit into RNA-seq stuff, but a lot of it's just gearing, making libraries for sequencing, and then we send off our sequencing. We do it out of house, and then all of that comes back. And so a lot of it will be, because we're a startup and we do consulting as well as making our own products. So sometimes it's dealing with our own products that we sent out and then fulfilling those services, but also it's doing consulting work. So it's whatever the customer at that point in time wants, they do a consultation with us, we meet with them, we talk about whatever their needs are, and then do a custom wet lab, dry lab build for them. So it kind of varies, but a lot of our stuff is genomic, transcriptomic preps.
Yeah, I can jump into maybe, I'll say like in my PhD and postdoc, I definitely did some wet lab work. I don't like it very much. I find it really stressful, but mostly like DNA extractions, prepping stuff for sequencing. And I do think that was really useful from a standpoint of understanding like kind of the chemistry that goes into that type of analysis. So that can be really helpful on the data science side of things when you're processing the data. Just having some understanding of library prep and things like that. I'd say at Bayer, I'm exclusively computational, but I work really closely with our biotech division to design experiments with breeders to lay out field trials and work with other scientists in the wet lab group to kind of figure out what data we need and how to get it and what sort of things we can do with their capabilities.
I guess I'll go next. At CTC Genomics, we don't do much data science per se. All the bioinformatics work that we do are for promoted analysis, trying to find best tools to improve gene expression. So we do have a scientist working in that area. We're always hiring for more people as we grow. I think that area is called vector technologies. And yes, we have plans to increase the number of people working in that area. But yeah, we're about to hire a bioinformatics person as well. So yeah, but not as much as Bayer as any other companies. Yeah.
I'm muted. Okay, we have a couple of questions for Jacob. I'm going to combine them into one question. So the first one is specifically at the USDA, what are the opportunities if you are an international student and want to apply to the USDA? And then if you get an interview with the USDA, what was the process like? And were the questions more focused on like what technical skills you have or something else?
Okay. Yeah, so the first question, as far as opportunities for international, the USDA, so the federal government in general, and this is true of most countries that I'm aware of, they really don't like to hire people who are not citizens or permanent residents, so it's very difficult. You can certainly get opportunities in USDA labs. You know, there are postdoc opportunities and some of those kinds of things, but permanent positions, for the most part, you've got to either be a permanent resident or a citizen. I know a lot of immigrants who have gotten USDA jobs. So actually, I would say probably I don't know, maybe half of the, maybe not quite half, maybe a third of the people who I know in USDA actually are originally from a country other than the United States. But they came here and had some other job for some amount of time and got permanent residency or citizenship before they went into the USDA. So that's, yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of a challenge. As far as the job interview process goes, it is very different than I think industry or academics. Preparing for, so the USDA is extremely focused on fairness and equality hiring. So every part of the, in fact, we aren't even allowed to do dinners with applicants anymore because it's an opportunity to ask illegal questions, right? And so essentially, basically every part of a USDA interview is attended by someone from equal opportunity employment, someone who specializes in that and certifies that it's, and so there's a lot of focus actually on being a government employee, right? Are you willing to work with people from diverse backgrounds? Are you willing to abide by government rules and regulations, which there are tons of them? And so there's a lot of ethics type questions and things like that in the USDA interview process. And of course, the science is also important. You've got to be a good fit. But that's an area where people often don't prepare very well, to recognize that, you know, you've got to have some good answers for those you have to have thought about it, right? About what it means to be a government employee and to not be allowed to participate in many of the political activities, right? That's taken very seriously. You know, I'm not allowed to endorse a candidate or a campaign or anything like that, right? And so there are things like that in the interview process that people typically don't think about. Other than that, I'd say it's a lot of soft skills and a very small amount of science in the interview process for USDA.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so our next question is for Sarah and Jacob, who were preparing and maybe thinking potentially about going into academia, government sort of roles before you're more in between an industry and government. How different is an application package between academia and an industry or government position? It seems like potentially the industry positions don't require a research statement since they're usually for a targeted project or position. And did you prepare for them differently because of that?
Sure, I can start this one, I guess. I think I should, full disclosure, I have not gone through an academic interview process, nor have I even applied, but it seems like much easier to apply for industry jobs. So one advantage there is you should just apply for everything. It's incredibly easy. Yeah, mainly I just had a cover letter and a resume. I kept my resume to about 2 pages. So shorter, I think, is good, but try to, you know, get everything in there. And then I would tailor that to the position I was applying for. So I would switch out my skills. Maybe if it was a more data science-y position, I would post more data science skills. If it was a more breeding oriented position, I would post more like modeling or skills related to quant gen maybe. And then the cover letter I would use to sort of emphasize things that aren't as clear from the resume, like how I've worked on teams or sought out interdisciplinary collaborations, things like that. I think the cover letter is underutilized. I don't know how many people read it, but it is a good chance to kind of sell yourself a little more than a resume can. And from my experience, those are the 2 main things for an industry interview packet. And then the interview itself, you usually do give some sort of talk. I did have one interview process where I had to do like a case study. So I had to do like an analysis and submit a report to them. That seems to be more of a data science-y type thing, but I guess that's not off the table. And that did take, I probably spent about 40 hours on that. So that's something to consider as well. But the talk tends to be more technical about your research experience.
Yeah. So just before I forget, yeah, I did with the government interviews. You also do typically have a standard 45-minute talk that is all science, right? In that part of it, so that is another part of it. As far as preparing the packet to submit and those kinds of things, for USDA, they tell you to submit a resume, but they really want a pretty detailed CV. It's sort of a combination of a resume and a CV. So you have everything there, but you also have some paragraphs that sort of describe what you did in each of your positions. Again, like Sarah said, when you apply for academics, you typically have like a research statement, you have a teaching statement, maybe a diversity statement. For government jobs, you typically have a long resume, I guess, and a cover letter, and that's it. And so your cover letter is really important. And you've got to be able to, within a page and a half, you've got to be able to tell your story and how you fit that position description, right? The other thing with government jobs, and I don't know whether this is true with industry or not, it certainly is not true with academics. HR makes a big part of the decisions with who gets hired in government, right? With academics, HR just passes it through and the scientists decide who to hire, right? In government, if you don't write your CV, your resume and your cover letter in a way that, someone who knows nothing about science can go through and figure out that you fit the position description, if they can't find the right words that fit together, you're out. If I'm the scientist who's in charge of hiring, I won't even get to see your resume. It'll never get to me. They'll remove it. There's a big weed out phase before the scientists even get to see it. So it's quite different that way. You really have to follow the directions painfully. And I would recommend, if you apply for a government job, that you contact the scientist. It'll be listed in there, the research unit or wherever. You contact that person and talk to them and get advice, because it's just not, you can't. It's just too complicated to try to get it correct. You'll get weeded out by HR the first 2 or 3 times. That's what happened to me. I finally figured it out after talking to a bunch of people. But so you really have. It's really important to put it together correctly. Yeah, that's all I'll say. I was thinking of one other thing, but I forgot. So.
Can I add some here? I haven't applied to academic jobs, but for industry, I completely agree with what Sarah and Jacob said. The keywords are very important. I know that some of those big companies already have automated systems and they don't find certain keywords in your CV, get automatically out. So just make sure when you apply, look at the job description, put it side by side to your resume and try to highlight how you fit with that job description. You might not have the exact same keyword, but if you do have the skills, just make sure you put it in the same way that they are describing it in that job ad. And just even the smaller companies, we have so many applicants and it's sometimes like very, very hard to just go and screen. You have so many people and all of them have various similar skills. So how you tell them apart? So I don't know if you guys will agree with this, but in my case, 80% of the applications that I work on, only 80% went through thanks to I knew somebody in the company that could put a word for me and just take my CV out of the pile and say, hey, this one is good. Otherwise, it's really hard. I never got a phone call if I'd apply, I never follow up with somebody inside the company, I will never ever get any phone call or anything, even though I thought, oh my God, my CV is the best. I'm sure they're gonna get me. I'm the perfect for this position. Yes, it's just a matter of competition and just being ahead of the pack, I guess.
I'd also like to add something to one of the questions that's in the comment section as well. I feel is appropriate here, just to take a step back from what everybody's talking about in terms of finding like openings and stuff. For me, I think there's, especially for industry jobs, there are two main ways. One of them is just Googling the company, and then they always have a careers page, and it's just, these are the open careers, and you just look and there's like a laundry list. So pick a company and then Google them. The way you find companies, or at least the way that I find companies, is I use LinkedIn. And I never used LinkedIn when I was a graduate student. I thought it was a dumb social media thing. I am now in industry and I use it every day. It is great. You connect with people, they recommend you, you can follow companies, and that company, if their marketing department is doing their job, they will post different openings. You also can find recruiters on LinkedIn a lot, and they will recommend you for different jobs. They will push you. It's like knowing somebody internal to the company, except as Jacob mentioned, they are HR related. So you get that HR bump as well. So those are the two major ways that I look for job openings if I'm looking, or I get recommended by people who are looking at our company.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to stick with you, Rishi, because I have a couple of data science questions. So to summarize them together, can you recommend any top data science skills for the plant science industry? Like which ones did you think were the most important? And then how did you learn those skills?
Yeah, okay. So for me, I think the like data science is this large world, right? There's a bunch of things in data science. It's really hot topic right now. For me, I think related to plant sciences, the biggest ones are related to machine learning and algorithms. And specifically, I think it relates to like object detection and making inferences based on large amounts of data sets. So object classification, object detection, these types of things. They're very Googleable. The way that I learned all this stuff was through YouTube. So I highly recommend YouTube, or just Googling around. There's a ton of videos on integrating Python skills, or integrating JavaScript, or integrating all these different computer languages. People have really nice tutorials. There's a great thing. Another thing I would learn is a thing called TensorFlow. And TensorFlow specifically has a new thing called Keras, and I can type out all these things in the chat so people get the spelling of them. But there are an immense amount of tutorials around the internet on all of these things: object detection, object classification. The Coco project is another great thing for machine learning object detection. It's basically it's like a website that has tens of thousands of images of just things that people have said. In this image, here are all the people, here are all the cars, here's a clock, here's a cat, here's a dog. And they just have masked all these things. And so you can run your own scripts and really get a sense for training and playing around with this stuff. On the genetics component of this too, there's a lot of machine learning algorithms that are now dealing with phenotyping as well as haplotype inferences. So machine learning is getting kind of really fancy, but all the basics are on YouTube and you can go from there.
Awesome. Thank you. That was super. I'm so fascinated by data science, and I think it's because I don't understand it at all as this like wet lab person. So I hear people talk about this really cool data stuff they do, and it's so over my head, but super fascinating. Okay, so I guess this sort of ties in a little bit to what Jacob was talking about, being sort of as a representative of the government now that you work for the government, but really any of you now as being sort of a representative of your company as opposed to being, you know, your individual self in academia. Do you feel like your relationship to science or your identity as a scientist changed after taking your current position?
Okay, I think I'll go ahead. Yes and no, that'll be my short answer. In my case, I took a very risky career path. So I got an MBA, and right now I'm not doing any science per se at all. So I don't work at the bench or anything like that. So I oversee all business operations within the company, from budgets to procurement, billing, contracts, everything that is needed to run a business. However, because we are in a very small team, I get to participate in journal clubs. I get to look at the lab meetings. I have a fairly good understanding of the type of science that we do at the company. And I think even though I'm not doing any science per se, I still have my scientific identity in place because I'm able to participate of the meetings, read and understand and talk the science. In the long run, I would like to get a little bit closer to the science per se and maybe get into a role that allow me to oversee some of those projects. I have all the skills that are needed for. I'm just looking for the right opportunity to transition into that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, when you think about alternative careers in science, not academia per se, there's always a fear that you're going to lose your identity as a scientist. You're not going to be doctor anymore, right? Nobody calls me doctor in the lab. I'm Carola. So, and sometimes that's scary. All those years that I spent learning about plant nematode interactions, plant pathogen interactions, all those classes that I took, what for? I'm not using any of that right now. But I think that the skills that you learn in academia, specifically the logic, the analysis type of skills, those are going to carry on forever. You're going to take it and you're going to apply it in every single job that you have, or most of them. Yes, so it's, I guess, don't be afraid to lose your identity per se. I don't think you will lose, it will just transform into something different.
Yeah, I would 100% echo Carola's comments. I honestly would say I feel more empowered as a scientist after switching to industry. I think as a grad student and postdoc, you're still very concerned about power dynamics. And like, if you have opinions, it's very hard to share those opinions in a public forum sometimes because, you know, you worry about the consequences to your career. And I'd say, at least being at Bayer, I don't worry about that. I'm not like, I guess I have to worry slightly about like sharing company secrets, but to be honest, I'm not like privy to that high level information. So it's not really as scary as I thought it would be. I can still talk to friends that work at other companies and things like that. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I can actually embrace science more than I could maybe in as a grad student or postdoc.
Awesome. Okay, so Sarah and Rishi, you two kind of took a little bit of contrasting paths to get into industry. So Rishi, you went right from your PhD, and Sarah, you did a postdoc first. So some of the panel or the participants today are not necessarily postdocs, but they are upper level PhD students who are preparing to graduate. So one of the questions is that to get an industry position, do you think they really need a postdoc experience to get hired, particularly if the student realized pretty early on in their PhD that they want to go the industry route? They have been actively involved in industry mentorship programs. And between a postdoc and an internship, which do you think would be more relevant to get hired with, say, Bayer or with Rishi with LeafWorks?
Yeah, I can start. So I don't think, I mean, as I did it, I don't think having an extensive postdoc is required. I actually technically did a postdoc. It was for about a month and a half. Just literally in the I signed my postdoc documents to do a postdoc, and then 2 weeks later got offered this job. So I worked as a postdoc for like a summer. I don't think it's necessary. Ultimately, I think what matters, at least for us when we're hiring, is do you meet the job ad? Do you have the technical skills? Do you have the soft skills? Can you interview well? Can you talk about the thing? For us, a big part of it at a startup where we don't have a ton of people is company culture. So we ooze company culture. We have our own vibe, we have our own look, we have things that we care about, pillars that we care about. And if you don't care about those things, or you don't even know what they are, even though they're easily accessible on a lot of our platforms, you're not going to jive well with us. And so for us, it's not necessarily the years of experience that you might gain through an additional postdoc or even doing a postdoc. It's mentality and ability. And if you can convey that in an interview, then you're golden.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I don't think a postdoc is necessary to get many industry positions. Some of them might, at least for Bayer, have different like years of experience requirements, but those don't have to be as a postdoc. It can be if you've worked in industry or other opportunities as well. I think with regard to internship versus postdoc, it just depends what you want to get out of it. If you want experience, sort of on-hands experience of what it's like to work in industry day to day, then an internship or a co-op, which is like a 6-month extended internship, are really awesome opportunities. Those I think often segue into a permanent position. I know several people who have done a co-op, which is typically during your degree. You take 6 months and you go work at a company like Bayer for those 6 months, and so you're really immersed in the organization. I think those are really great, especially if you know you want to go into industry, or if you're uncertain and you want to try it out. But yeah, I'd say for me personally, I chose a postdoc because I knew there were skills I still wanted to get, and I think a postdoc is a great option if you know there are areas that you want to develop more before applying, but not necessary.
I'm also going to add that when we look at applications anywhere, when I was applying before taking the LeafWorks job, a lot of people said that like your graduate work counts as experience, right? Like you're still, even though you're a student, you're still doing the work, you're still training, you're still gaining skills. So don't just start your experience when you graduate. Your experience starts before you graduate. And so when you're talking about that in interviews, if they say, oh, you need 5 years of experience, well, if you've done a 5-year PhD, then you have 5 years of experience. So make sure that you guys are counting those years.
That's a really good point. Okay, next question up for anyone. And I think depending on how fast we answer this, this may be our last question that we have time for. But I would like to point out that we have a Twitter @PlantPostdocs. We would encourage anyone whose question wasn't able to be asked today to head on over to our Twitter page, and we'll try to continue these sort of conversations there on Twitter after the webinar is over. So this question up for anyone is, how much training for your position can you expect after you have accepted the position in industry or government? So if after you've already accepted the job, how much training will your company or government position give you?
I guess I can start. Mine is kind of weird because we're at a startup. All the training that we've gotten after is all self-taught for all of the sciencey stuff. So all of the data science stuff that I talked about a couple of questions ago, that was all self-taught while I've worked for LeafWorks. I didn't know any of that before I joined this company. And the only reason I learned it is because we had a need for it. And there's not a lot of us here, and I'm the only person who does computational stuff. So if I don't learn it, it doesn't get done if we need it in the computational side. I would say for business skills, we actually went out and talked to our board, talked to various investors that communicate with us. They are interested in us succeeding, so they were willing to teach us business skills, and we got crash courses on how to make models and how to do like financial models and all this other stuff. So don't be afraid to ask other people for training, I guess is my takeaway from that.
Yeah, in our case, we do train people. If that person is the right person, it has this right soft skills, it can communicate and work well in a team, doesn't have to be the expert in that specific job. I think we are able to train that people and offer that as well. Also, we're a small company, so we don't have we usually are very aggressive in hiring. We don't take too long. And for that reason, maybe we don't get to like the best applicant ever, but we just decide on the very first number of people that we saw, because we really need to get going and get them. So yes, we train them. A lot of the job that we post, we do train a lot. Technical skills. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for Bayer, I'd say there's not much like in the way of like formal onboarding training. I think there's like a single in-person session, but then your manager works with you closely to help you like meet people, get access to things. I'd say the IT component is the hardest part of like getting access to different resources. And then there's also a lot of self-guided trainings, and these include both soft skill development and technical skills. Like we can sign up for data camp courses and different sort of learning tracks depending on your skill level. So lots of ongoing training opportunities.
Yeah, I think it's similar in government. You know, it really depends on what you need. There's lots of opportunities. There's you know, we have a training portal, which there are certain trainings we're required to take. Those tend to be more of the rule and regulation type stuff. But there's a lot of other trainings on technical skills, programming, all sorts of things that one can take if they want to. We have individual development plans that we're supposed to do each year, where we specifically decide on trainings we want to take. And if we can convince our boss that it's important enough, they'll pay for us to go do it. So there's lots of options. It really depends on what you need and what you can convince your employer that you need.
All right, and we are just at an hour. So I just wanted to say thank you again to all of our panelists for participating today. And thank you to all of the participants. You asked some great questions. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get through all of the Q&A. So just want to remind you again that the conversation will hopefully continue over on our Twitter feed. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.